It's week 3 on the Me and White Supremacy virtual pilgrimage. My name's Reverend John Borthwick, and I'm the minister at St. Andrew's in Guelph, and I've invited my congregation to join me on this virtual pilgrimage through Layla Saad's book, Me and White Supremacy. Week 3, what is tone policing? Let me give you the definition from Layla as found in the book, and then let me offer a reflection on what I'm reading. Tone policing is a tactic used by those who have privilege to silence those who do not by focusing on the tone of what is being said rather than the actual content. Tone policing. Well, here's what stood out for me. Over the years, I've heard many comments, and I've thought things myself, that people, individuals in the world, would get their message across much better if only they didn't shout, they didn't swear, they didn't express anger or frustration or lose it. And I can say that for the most part, I think, I'm not 100% sure, I haven't said a lot of those kind of things out loud myself, but I've certainly heard them. And I'm also very much aware that I've thought them. And as Layla says in this chapter, thinking this kind of way, thinking in a tone policing kind of way, causes just as much harm as saying it out loud. And I think what's sort of come up for me around this is I was taught, or somehow I caught it, or I would have said that this was just knowing how to play the game, knowing how to navigate the system. This is just how you get by in the world. If you want to move forward with a cause or make change, I'm a part of many different places and spaces where I'm advocating for change. And so part of my understanding of it was that this is just how you're supposed to do it. And I wouldn't have thought, as I was thinking these things, that I was doing something called tone policing. But within myself, I acknowledge I was. Let me share a quick story, and I won't share all the details again. We only have a short amount of time to share. But when I was serving in another church congregation, in a fairly diverse community, over 50% of our congregation was BIPOC. And I was the leader, the minister. And I was in a meeting one time that I was leading or facilitating. And in this meeting, one of the individuals in the meeting was a South African man, an older South African man who grew up in South Africa during apartheid. He spoke about how he and people like him were defined during the apartheid system in South Africa. And he used a term called colored. That's how he was defined by the South African apartheid system. And he spoke a lot about the ways in which he was excluded, unable to participate in certain spaces, had to sit in certain spaces, even in church. And he also was prevented from getting a full education because of this word, this definition of who he was within apartheid South Africa. One evening, as we were having a meeting amongst a group of people that I was leading, he became angry and upset about a specific agenda item. And I can't, to this day, I actually do not remember what the agenda item was. But I do remember his tone, and I do remember him getting angrier and angrier and speaking to me in a way that I found difficult and challenging for the rest of this meeting. And I remember saying to him that I wouldn't answer his question until he changed his tone. And I'm thinking about that now and thinking about the way in which that was tone policing. I'm thinking about the ways in which his experience living through an apartheid system in South Africa where he had been marginalized, he had been silenced, that something around that experience that he was having in that moment, I do wonder if he wasn't feeling like he was being heard and it was bringing up something for him, and I wasn't able to listen or hold space for him to have that experience. I only wanted him to conform, and in fact I demanded from him that he conform to my system, and if he didn't, I wouldn't listen to him. He left the meeting. I did meet with him the next day and had a conversation with him about the experience and everything else, but I had no sense of the stuff that I'm talking about today as a part of that conversation. So I have no idea if that really would have been helpful to have a better understanding of what he was truly experiencing. I didn't know. It was 20 years ago, and I had no idea of any of maybe some of these things that I'm learning in this experience. But this is what's bubbling up for me. I wanted him to conform to my system. And so maybe the system is what's wrong, right? Why wouldn't I question the system? And why wouldn't I want to think about the system that I'm in? And I understand, why would I not want to change the system? Well, I'm afraid of what that change in the system might look like. I'm comfortable navigating the system. I know how to play the game, as I say. I understand it. And I'm very much aware now, much more than ever, that the system somehow benefits me every single day without me ever having to earn that. But is a system that silences another person, that seeks to minimize the fullness of one's human experience, one's emotions and feelings, is that a kind of system that we should continue to uphold? Or is that a system that we need to question, dismantle, and change? That's what's bubbling up for me today on the third week of our virtual pilgrimage through Layla Saad's book, Me and White Supremacy. Question for the church. How do you see, how does tone policing show up in the church? Thank you for joining me on this virtual pilgrimage, and may we continue to strive to do what is right and not just what's easy.